Neuroscience can be really intimidating sometimes, but I'm here to help you clarify how neuroscience can be so useful and relatable in day-to-day. And to start off, I want to talk about what I learned about humanity while staring at neurons for 6.5 years in my PhD. You see, when I was at Emory for my PhD in neuroscience, I was studying how we learn new information for the first time. And how do we remember that for the long term, right? Especially the information that's so important for what you're trying to achieve. Let's say you're trying to ace on a test or get that job that you want or run a marathon. And you acquire specific information that is going to help you thrive and succeed at a specific task, right? And to study this in an experimental setting, I was working with mice, actually playing a video game in virtual reality. Okay, you might think that virtual reality is like something like animals having like VR goggles or something like that. But to do this in a mice setting, it was a little bit different. So mice are exposed, kind of placed in front of this curved screen where the visual cues are projected onto, and the mice are actually experiencing this immersive environment that you can't they're actually able to learn. They're so good at learning this task because they're food motivated, and depending on how they behave and how quickly they learn, uh, basically they're able to get rewards that automatically get dispensed if they're in the right place. Now, spatial navigation is basically what this is. Learning how to get from A to B, just like you're driving a car to get to your workplace or get to your friend's house. You figure out how to get from A to B, you figure out the path, and that's very similar to how we experience life because we have this sequential order of events. We've got this timing differences, and things are happening in sequence. And turns out the brain actually has a way to um, hold that information in a long-term storage so that we can go back to what mattered to us before, like that amazing restaurant that you've been to in a new city that you haven't been before. And as I was using this spatial navigation as a model to understand how new memory formation actually happens, I discovered something really interesting. So just overall, the one thing that I learned is that, hey, we've got such a different variety of cells in the brain. I'm just focusing on neurons and specifically what's called inhibitory interneurons. These are the cells that actually tone down the activity of other cells around them. These are cells that are just for interneurons, inhibitory interneurons. There are 50 different types of it. And I've been told that there are over 3,000 different cell types that exist in the brain. Just imagine the brain as kind of a container of all these different types of populations, just like the world that hosts so many different types of people, backgrounds, functions, and roles and skills. And I also want you to remember that each one of these cell type is actually so specialized and so specific in what they're doing, and it's just amazing and incredible how delicate and precise these systems all work together. And so, if you're one of if you, if you ever felt like working as a cog in the system, you actually are contributing significantly to this entire population of the world. Turns out we all need each other. One person may have a stellar personality and a way of working with people. Other people might have, another person might have actually an amazing way to work on data, quantitative statistics, or something like that. And there are just incredible variety of skill sets and qualities and characteristics that makes the life all the more interesting and collaborative. So you can actually come up with more creative ideas because we have this diversity of people. The second thing I learned is that we've got gatekeepers. Just like we have different types of people in our world, we've got gatekeepers in the brain that kind of act like a bouncer at an exclusive club. Like not everyone is going to get in. The bouncer is going to kind of look down, top to bottom and figure out whether you're going to be let in or not. Just like that, there are gatekeepers of specific information so that whether this piece of information is actually worth remembering to you or not. And that matters a lot because we can't remember literally everything that we experience. Every moment, every second of our day is filled with so much stimulation that meets our eyes, and we can't possibly process every single thing to a great extent. So what the brain does is to differentiate what matters to you, what's more relevant, what's not relevant, based on how focused you are on a specific goal. And this is where I talk a lot about why understanding different perspectives is so important, because everybody has a different goal and different perspective, and that is going to affect how they interact with other people, what they see in the same situation. And just think about how many times that we think back to a specific memory that we thought everybody remembered the same way. Turns out it's a complete different memories that we have about the same exact situation. And so depending on how people see a certain aspect of an environment is going to help shape how they remember that particular thing about that experience. Um, the I learned is that we've got to be willing to be um, trial and error and fail. And this is when I was working with mice, actually a long time before I started PhD. I've worked with a mouse to understand how the dopamine system actually helped or contributed to learning, specifically food reward. Um, and I remember this one particular mouse, still remember to this day, that it took him 53 days to learn the same exact task as everybody else in that cohort had to learn. It's a very simple lever pressing thing. But it's a new motor learning. You have to learn the sequence of motor movements to get to where I want them to be. And and yet the mouse took 53 days, and I was very proud of him. The day that it succeeded, I remember giving him a lot of rewards. um, and just like that, we've got to be willing to try out different approaches. I remember the guy trying to press the lever the first time and was taking this really interesting strategy. Like instead of just pressing with the little paw, you're the guy was taking like a little kind of like going through putting putting some weight on his um, side of his body and actually putting pressure and like with his body. The next time he tried, it was actually sat on it, literally sitting on the lever until he finally realized, hey, I don't have to use my entire body. I can just use the little paw, and that's just enough. So just giving it a try and figuring out what is the most effective way to get to my goal. And I see that in everyday life where every human is trying to accomplish something, some sort of an outcome, just like New Year's resolutions. We're all headed we're all headed to a particular outcome that we desire, and yet depending on who we are, what our personalities are, what our backgrounds or how we're brought up, it's going to shape how differently we approach that. So it's so important to be willing to try out different types of way to succeed and see which one is most effective for you. Because not everyone is going to have the one size fits all kind of a solution for everything. Okay. And then I've learned another thing that's the main meat of the project is about the inhibitory neurons, specifically in the brain region called hippocampus, which is where all the new learning actually happens, new memory formation happens. And what I found out is that the loudest voice in our world isn't the most important. What do I mean by that? Just because someone is the loudest in the room doesn't mean that they're the smartest. Doesn't mean that they're the most willing, worth listening to. And we have to see it in the perspective of the neuroscience in the brain. What I found is that the pauses of activity from having these loud noises in our head are what actually create important memories. So inner neurons, they're usually there to control the activity of other neurons by suppressing it, and that's what they call inhibitory neurons. These neurons are active at specific points in time. So what I found is that they are actually get quieter when the animal approach the most important information, which is about where's my food, right? And they're able to help neuronal firing happen at specific positions in place and time that makes it so much more important for remembering that information about where the food is and how to get there. So it's not that the neurons that have to be constantly loud and the most noisy is winning the whole system. It's the opposite. It's the quietness, the small pauses, the small gaps in our activity to that really makes a difference in terms of how efficiently, how effectively we can remember something that's important to us. And I think this actually goes to my next point, which is embracing the setback. I tend to think of inhibition as in a more humanitarian way, or more philosophical way, as something most people feel as negative. Because just the word inhibition sounds like it's very negative, it's oppressive or restrictive. But instead, we actually have to look at it as something to embrace because this is what keeps you from attending to literally everything that keeps our attention. Just because the TikTok video is so addicting doesn't mean any of those videos is worth it to you or meaningful to you or important to your goals, right? So you have to understand how to control your own attention, your cognitive energy, your thinking space, the cognitive load, and also control the behavior. What is my next action after watching this? So for all of that requires this break in the system, and that's what inhibition brings. A year before my graduation, where I was set to defend my dissertation, I was hit by a car while walking to school. I was literally outside of my apartment, and it was you could see from the window of my room where that accident took place. And I remember to this day how grateful I am that I actually took some mindfulness class the semester prior because that really helped me to calm my mind down and focus on what really mattered. What also helped me was to see the teenage driver that didn't see me walking and how traumatic that experience has been for them as well. So I was able to actually put myself kind of turn off the survival instinct of you know the negative voices in my head that what's happening to me, why is this happening to me, like me kind of focus on me, but rather turn that attention around to the next person in front of me. And I was able to have that compassion for it must have been just as traumatic for them as it was for me, and that helped me calm down. I wasn't able to I was able to manage it much better than I could have if I was focusing on my pain, for example. Just like that, when you start introducing some pauses, when you start introducing some breaks in the system, now you're able to have this time of deliberate action, kind of plan out what is my next choice going to be and how important is that to achieving my goal. it gives people the time and space to truly choose what matters to them instead of just mindlessly scrolling. Uh, and I think the final thing I wanted to say about what I learned about humanity after staring at neurons for 6.5 years is this idea called timing in Inyeon. I'm Korean and I hear a lot of movies or K dramas actually talk about this concept of Inyeon, which is this idea that people are put in place at the right time, at the right place for a reason. And when I see you and you're seeing my video for the first time, that is actually an Inyeon, an example of Inyeon. And all of that is actually timing. When I was working with these inhibitory neurons in my video game scenario with mice, what I found is that the point in time, the exact time and place where these inner neurons activity changed or decreased was actually more important than the change itself. So if I stimulate the inner neurons to be active in places that didn't matter, it was far from the actual locations of reward, it didn't actually help mice learn at all over 3 days. Whereas if I stimulated at the specific places, if I basically let the inhibition activity change happen at a normal place, what normally happens, that's what made it possible for the animal to learn. So it's it's like things need to happen at the right time, at the right place. Just like we sometimes have to kind of accept what's happening to us, have the mindset to observe, have the space to think broader, think more long term, and try to get to our goals one day at a time. Well, I think I spoke enough for the first video. I'm happy to share more details about the actual study and in, in case people are interested in learning more about exactly how these recordings work, the tools that I've used to really get into the nitty-gritty details of the study. But I wanted to first give you an exposure of how neuroscience, what happens in our brain every single day, is so relatable to what we're doing on a broader scale in human connection, in how we interact with people, our work, goals. So I would like to make more videos about how these very academic concepts that could be pretty complicated and so niche, so-called so specialized, and turn that into something that's more practical, more relatable, and apply to a more kind of a break down the walls between different fields of study. So yeah, this is an experimentation on my part as well. I'm taking my own advice to trial and error to keep trying so that I can learn what is the most effective way for me to get to my goal. So thank you for watching. And if you want to learn more about this kind of content, I'm always happy to hear your feedback and suggestions. So write something about what you found really interesting about this video. And I'll see you next time.